Hartmann Report today, my newsletter, my daily take is titled, Trump Sounds the GOP's Death Knell, the End of the Old Republican Order. And, you know, I tell a story about, I grew up in a Republican household. My dad, you know, was a Republican, I don't know if he was a precinct committee chair, but he was a precinct something or other. I think they called him precinct captains back then. And he was very involved with the Republicans. He wasn't a crazed right-winger. I know it says that over on Wikipedia, I think, but they don't let you edit your own page. So, but he was, you know, yeah, he was all in favor of Goldwater, but he was really an Eisenhower Republican, and that's the kind of Mitt Romney and arguably even the Ronald Reagan Republican Party that I think we saw yesterday at the Republican National Committee or convention. I think what we saw yesterday was the final death of that party. And the two things that made this very, very clear to me was, number one, Mitch McConnell, he didn't get up and say anything. He was simply named as one of the three co-chairs of the convention, right? Which is just an honorific title. It doesn't mean anything other than, you know, we're kind of honoring this person. And he got booed. Mitch McConnell, the guy who stole a Supreme Court seat from Barack Obama and stole another one from Joe Biden, that guy got booed. And then, of course, Trump chose J.D. Vance, who is no old-fashioned Republican. J.D. Vance has undergone a conversion. I mean, literally, I believe it was 2019, he adopted Catholicism as his religion. But beyond that, he has had a political conversion as well. He has, and by the way, nothing wrong with adopting Catholicism, but his political conversion, I think there is something wrong. He's gone from being, you know, a rational, never Trump Republican to full-on MAGA. He's as MAGA as you can get. And of course, you know, that's why Trump picked him. And what this tells us, and the scuttlebutt is that Trump met with his sons, and Trump was planning on picking Doug Burgum. I had been predicting Doug Burgum more or less for some time. I had this conversation with Michael Steele a couple days ago, and I believe during that conversation I asserted my belief that it would probably be Doug Burgum. I'd have to go back and listen to it, but I'd certainly been thinking that because Doug Burgum is the kind of guy who wouldn't upstage Trump, right? He's not going to get more publicity than Trump. Doug Burgum is, you know, kind of a quiet, introverted guy, or at least he comes across as one. I doubt he is one. You know, you don't get to be governor of a state that way, and he kind of comes across as a moderate, even though he's not. J.D. Vance is, you know, a fire-breathing, you know, product of Peter Thiel and some other, you know, Silicon Valley billionaires. Thiel funded his rise to the United States Senate, and had Chuck Schumer not refused to give Tim Ryan, you know, an additional $5 million, Tim Ryan would have been the state's senator. I mean, that was a very, very close race, and that was a huge mistake by Chuck Schumer. But in any case, this whole Republican Party, the old Republican Party that my dad was part of, I think is dead. You know, and this is a question that I'd toss out to you: is do you think it can be revived, or even should be? You know, we could do a post-mortem. We could go back and say, okay, Reagan opened the door to the right wing. I would argue that it was Goldwater, but Goldwater was never president. But Reagan certainly opened the door to the right wing, the hardcore, you know, right wing. And the Supreme Court, you know, by Nixon putting Lewis Powell on the U.S. Supreme Court in 1972, and then Lewis Powell ruling in 76 and 78 and writing the decision in 78 in Buckley and then Bellotti in those two Supreme Court cases that legalized political bribery back in the 70s. I mean, that's what made, really in many ways, possible Reagan coming into office floating on an ocean of oil industry money. But in any case, that old Republican Party is gone. And, you know, I go through, in my article, I go through, you know, what traditional Republicans believed versus what Trump and Vance believe. And, you know, traditional Republicans were all in favor of free trade. Now, you know, I'm not a full-on advocate of free trade, but nonetheless, they argued for the principle of comparative advantage. And Trump and Vance, on the other hand, are, hardcore trade war guys and frankly xenophobic in their protectionism, which I'm not. Traditional Republicans supported, at least rhetorically, balanced budgets and fiscal sanity. Trump and Vance were just fine when Trump added $8.4 trillion to the national debt, more than any other non-wartime president has done in 4 years in the entire history of the United States. Traditional Republicans supported rights to privacy and personal autonomy. Big government that would snoop in your private life was anathema to Republicans. They were fine with the, for example, gay log cabin Republicans. Trump and Vance, on the other hand, support draconian laws on abortion. They're pushing to end Americans' rights to birth control, gay marriage, and the ability to check out the books you want from your local library. J.D. Vance says women should be forced to stay in abusive relationships for the children. And that even, speaking of children, even children who are raped and impregnated should be forced at gunpoint to carry their pregnancies to term. Traditional Republicans helped build American public schools. This was Eisenhower's great accomplishment. We were the envy of the world, our public school system in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Trump and Vance, on the other hand, want to subsidize private, for-profit church schools and subsidize the upper middle class and rich people, and basically ghettoize public schools for working class people and poor. Traditional Republicans endorse the concept of America as a worldwide example of democracy, Reagan's shining city on the hill. Trump and Vance want to hand Ukraine off to Putin and tell Russia and China, you can do whatever you want. Traditional Republicans defended nations' sovereignty. Trump and Vance, as I mentioned, want to turn Ukraine over to Russia. Traditional Republicans defended American institutions of law enforcement. Trump and Vance supported congressional Republicans when they voted to defund the FBI. And when 2 Capitol Police officers showed up in the Pennsylvania State House, Republicans stood up and booed them. They defended the January 6th traitors, and Vance even raised money for them. Traditional Republicans demanded high moral standards from their president. Vance is supporting a guy who cheated on all 3 of his wives, the last one with a porn star, and has been credibly accused of rape by over 20 women, one of them 13 years old, and found by a jury of his peers to have actually raped E. Jean Carroll. He bragged about walking into the dressing rooms of teenage girls when he owned the Teen Miss USA competition, or pageant. Traditional Republicans honored law and order. Vance is now, and keeping your word and integrity in business relationships. And they had just disgust for con men, hustlers, and lawbreakers. Trump paid $25 million to make people whole from his Trump University scam. He was fined hundreds of millions for business and tax fraud. He stole, along with his son Eric, from a children's cancer charity. He had 6 bankruptcies, leaving people holding the bag for billions. He's been sued over 3,000 times for refusing to pay his bills. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You can read the whole list over at HartmannReport.com if you want. But the point is that today's MAGA Republican Party bears very, very little resemblance at all to the Republican Party that I grew up with, that you grew up with. And, will we get back a reasonable Republican Party where Democrats and Republicans can kind of work out compromises and make things happen? Or is it just going to be this continual right-wing billionaire-funded warfare?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
As they say in the radio business, stay tuned. I'll be right back with you.